I probably couldn't have made this video at a worse time because after getting traded from the Portland Trail Blazers to the Toronto Raptors, Gary Trent Jr. hasn't had the best start to his career as a Toronto Raptor, averaging 7 points a game, 28% from the field, 10% from 3 on 1 of 10 shots, just over 3 rebounds, a whopping 0 assists. Yeah, it hasn't been great, but you've seen the title of the video. You see what I'm saying. This could be a potential steal for the Toronto Raptors. It's not going to be a steal if he keeps up this efficiency and keeps up this numbers, but we've now seen enough of him over an extended period of time to know he's a legit player, and with the Toronto Raptors development, which we're going to talk about in a bit, this could be a steal, and for reasons that I'm going to talk about outside of Norman Powell. This isn't about me saying Gary Trent Jr. is a better player than Norman Powell, because right now Norman Powell is a better player than Gary Trent Jr. and by a decent margin, but there's other reasons that go into this, thinking that this could be a genius or a very smart move from Masai Ujiri and the Toronto Raptors, who continue to make smart moves, so this would just be another one to add to the collection. Just briefly talking about Gary Trent Jr.'s time in Toronto, just quickly. We can't judge him based off 2 games, going to a new situation, getting traded halfway through the season, just shooting the ball poorly. There's not too much else to say. He's just missed his 3-point shots. It happens. Shooters go through stretches in which they can't make shots. He's just unfortunately happened to be after he joined a new team. But before I go any further and talk about why I think this could be a potential steal for the Raptors, if you could drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, it's free. I make content like this every single day, and doing so, it just really helps out how the video goes. So that would be much appreciated. Now, like I mentioned, I don't think Gary Trent Jr. is better than Norman Powell at this stage in their career. But for people saying, oh, it's a like-for-like trade, Norman Powell's a very good player. Toronto Raptors fans know that better than most. So people saying, this doesn't make sense for the Blazers, I understand it from the Blazers' perspective because they're looking at a 1-year rental kind of thing. Maybe they're willing to pay him more. But from the Raptors' perspective, I have trust in Masai Ujiri. I have trust in Bobby Webster. I have trust in those guys that they've done the due diligence. They know what Norman Powell is going to be asking for. He's probably going to be asking for somewhere in the 20 million range because of the season he's having. And they're probably not willing to give that to someone who's now 27. They don't know if they see a future with him. I don't know the reasons, but all I'm saying is there's probably a reason they traded him, expecting that he wouldn't re-sign and they'd get absolutely nothing in return. So instead, you trade him for Gary Trent Jr., who only just turned 22 as opposed to Norman Powell, who's 27, and he's now proven that he's at the very least a guy who can give you 15 points a game on good shooting, particularly from beyond the arc, where he's shooting 40% from 3, and this volume and efficiency, it's not an aberration, it's not something that just happened this season, it stretches back to the second half of last season, it stretches back to the bubble, where he lit the bubble on fire, averaging 17 points a game on over 50% from the field, 50% from 3. He was quieter in the playoffs, but that was against the Lakers. That was against the best defense in the NBA, the best team in the NBA in his first playoff series at just 21 years of age. You can give him a little bit of an excuse for that. Sure, he didn't play great, but we've seen a lot of players play really poorly in their first couple of playoff series and still turn out to be great NBA players and win championships. So we're not really going to take too much away from him for a poor playoff series. But the bubble beforehand was amazing, and this season he's been great as well. In the absence of CJ McCollum, bigger role, bigger minutes, more opportunity, and he's taken full advantage of that. But ultimately, getting back to why I think this could be a steal is because Gary Trent Jr. is a restricted free agent. Norman Powell is not. He is an unrestricted free agent. Like I mentioned, I know the Raptors have one of the best front offices, if not the best front office in the NBA. They probably know that Norman Powell was not going to re-sign. So you trade him away for Gary Trent Jr. and Rodney Hood. So Rodney Hood had a good game against the Portland Trail Blazers. The Rodney Hood revenge game? Is that something? So maybe he turns into something. He was really good a couple of years ago for the Trailblazers. He came off an injury and has now struggled. We're talking about Gary Trent Jr. because he is the key piece to this deal. But you've got Gary Trent Jr. as a restricted free agent. And the difference in this is they can match what other teams are willing to offer. So if a team offers $15 million a year, they can match that. It's just more insurance for them to have. And if they overpay him, they might still overpay him, but they still have the asset. That's something that they can do. Maybe they pay him $17 million a year, $18 million a year. It seems like an overpay. Maybe they don't want to do that, but it's still the asset. And then you can trade him away halfway through the season if he's having a good season. That's still something that you have to keep in mind. So they have the potential of an asset, and a really good asset for a team that knows how to develop players, someone who's 22 coming off the best season of his career. for the potential of trading away Norman Powell, who looked like walking a few months down the line, for someone who's 22 and could be on a long-term contract for the Toronto Raptors as either a potential trade asset or someone who can just be in the starting lineup. It just makes a lot of sense. But the thing is, even if they weren't to trade him away, or if they were to pay him a little bit more than they would have liked, if they can have a competent center, and then all of a sudden, Fred VanVleet, Gary Trent Jr., OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, and any center in the league that's not named Aaron Baines, all of a sudden you're not just looking at a pretty young core, but also a team that has a really good defensive identity. Something Trent Jr. really made a name for himself in Portland firstly was just his ability to defend. Obviously, he could shoot the three ball, but he isn't getting on the floor as much as he was last season if he's not defending as hard as he was at the three. A bit of an undersized three, but he made it work. Someone who could switch between twos, threes, and even at times fours when he was asked to do for a Portland Trailblazers team that didn't have great defense. They were terrible defensively, let's be honest, which is why he was asked to do so much defensively. You now come to the Raptors, and all of a sudden, you're looking at a team where he's going to be alongside OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, Nick Nurse, Fred VanVleet, all of these defensive players and defensive-minded coaches, and he goes from someone who's asked to do a lot for a team that doesn't have much defensively just last season, even this season, with some new inclusions, he's still one of their better defenders. And all of a sudden, maybe he's asked to guard the third, the fourth best player on the opposition team, and he's someone that could clamp that kind of player up. He goes from someone who's asked to do a lot defensively to probably doing less and fitting into the system as more of a cog as a defender, and he's going to do a great job of that. This could make this defense even better than it has been in the past, particularly once you get rid of Aaron Baines. Now, like I mentioned, the timing of this video is poor because his first two games have been terrible. Hopefully his game against Detroit today is going to be better. Well, yeah, hopefully, because the tank for Cade Cunningham for the Pistons, let's go. But hopefully that game's going to be better. If there's one thing to take out of his first two games, there's not too much, but he had a career-high 7 rebounds. Norman Powell wasn't a great rebounder. He wasn't a great rebounder in Portland. If there's one thing we can take out of it, he got 7 rebounds. You could say that he wasn't a great rebounder in Portland because he was playing alongside Yusuf Nurkic, Enes Kanter. These are great rebounders. Maybe his rebounds were getting stolen. I don't know. I'm reaching at straws, but we've only seen 2 games. We need to see more sample size. But if he can be a good rebounder alongside an undersized Fred VanVleet, it's something. Maybe it's not much, but it's something. And then I have faith that his shooting will come back and his scoring and his offense will all come back as well. Ultimately, this is a hypothetical because we don't know if the Raptors will sign Gary Trent. We don't know if he'll struggle in a new team. Maybe this is just the new Gary Trent Jr. shooting 10% from 3. Maybe it was just Damian Lillard and the GOAT Terry Stotts unlocking his full potential, and the Raptors, one of the better organizations in the league, don't know how to do that. Maybe that's the case. I highly doubt that. I think he's going to get back to that 15 points a game on 40% from 3, at least be a consistent 3-point shooter, a good defender, someone who you want on your team is a 22-year-old for a team in the Raptors that we know are great at developing young players. That's something that I want to talk about. They're great at developing young players. Pascal, OG, Chris Boucher, Kyle Lowry, Fred VanVleet. I don't need to continue naming players because you know the guys. The guy they just traded away developed from someone who looked like a bench piece to now one of the most efficient volume scorers in the NBA, Norman Powell. That's what he's doing now. That's what the Raptors do to their players. They just kind of supercharge them. And if Gary Trent Jr. goes from a good role player, which is currently what he is, which when people hear the word role player, sometimes they get a little bit offended. It's not offense to him. A good role player is a good thing. But if he goes from a good role player to maybe an all-star, dare I say, or a great role player, then all of a sudden $15 to $16 million a year for someone at that age, for this core, that could be a great signing for the Raptors and could be a steal, like I mentioned, with Norman Powell having potentially walked for nothing. That's ultimately what it comes down to. To potentially go from having Norman Powell walk for nothing to potentially signing a 22-year-old young guard who has averaged 15 a game, shooting 40% from 3, can guard multiple positions, and has the potential to be even better going forward for a great organization. That's what it comes down to. That's why this trade could be genius. Could. It's a potential, it's a hypothetical, but that's why I'm saying it could be a great trade. It hasn't started greatly because he hasn't started his career greatly, but I think he'll turn it around. Let's expect him to turn it around, starting with his game against the Detroit Pistons today. Just a good trade all around, but some people have different opinions. Let me know what you think of it. I know Toronto Raptors fans are sad to see Norman Powell go because he's kind of like their underrated gem. Everyone's talked about all of their other players in one way or another. Norman Powell always slipped under the radar and was having a great season. So I know Raptors fans really liked him for that. Unfortunately, he's now gone. But if you get someone like Gary Trent Jr. in return, and he turns out to be the player that he could be, all of a sudden, it's probably not going to be as sad for Raptors fans as it once was when they traded him. Anyways, like the video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel if you made it to the end of the video. You may as well subscribe. Have a good day as well. Other than that, I'll catch you next time. Bye.